The horizon arc hummed quietly as it coasted through the dark lanes between stars, its colossal hull a gleaming silver against the void. Inside, the crew moved through routine. Officers analyzed data on the bridge, engineers monitored reactor levels, and in the lower maintenance levels, a part-time helper named Jace Wren was busy unclogging a coolant vent with a spanner and a grimy towel. Jace wasn't supposed to be there, not originally. He'd taken the job to pay off student debt, expecting a quiet rotation in deep space with some extra credits and zero drama. What he got instead was a front-row seat to one of the most terrifying events in human spacefaring history. It began without warning. A loud, metallic thud echoed through the corridor. Jace froze, towel in hand. Another thud, closer this time. Then an ear-splitting screech as emergency lights flooded the hallway in crimson red. Alarms blared across the intercom, their harsh tones accompanied by the computerized voice of the ship's AI. Unidentified breach in Docking Bay 2. All personnel initiate lockdown procedures. Jace's heart pounded. What the hell? He muttered, scrambling to pack his tools. But before he could move far, the lights flickered again, then went dark. For 2 full seconds, silence reigned. Then came the sound of boots. Heavy, mechanical, alien. He ducked into a supply shaft just as 3 figures emerged around the corner. Tall, armored beings with jagged exosuits and glowing green visors. Varnak. He didn't need a crew briefing to recognize them. Every spacer had heard the warnings. Merciless, power-hungry scavengers who raided human ships and enslaved entire crews. But they weren't supposed to be in this sector. No one thought they had the nerve. Jace held his breath, barely daring to blink as the trio passed by. One of them hissed something guttural into a comlink. The language was strange, but the tone was unmistakable. Control, coordination, conquest. They moved past without noticing him, their footsteps receding into the distance. Jace waited a full minute, heart thudding, before inching out. He couldn't go back to the corridor. Instead, he crawled into the maintenance conduit he'd opened earlier, slipping through the shaft like a rat. The space was tight, filled with dust and humming pipes, but offered one crucial thing: invisibility. He moved quietly, carefully, emerging near the lower engineering deck. The lights here were dim, flickering. A plasma burn scorched the wall near the bulkhead. No crew in sight. His wristband communicator was dead. EMP, maybe? He glanced at a nearby terminal, also offline. He was truly cut off. That's when he heard it. A voice. Human. Muffled. Jace pressed his ear to the metal grating above. 2 decks up. He found a maintenance ladder and climbed slowly, hand over hand, careful not to make a sound. At the top, he peered through another grate into the med bay below. Chaos. Crew members were bound at the wrists, guarded by 2 Varnak with pulse rifles. A third alien barked orders at what looked like a surviving officer, Commander Hessa, bruised but defiant. The alien jabbed her with an electric prod when she refused to speak. Jace gritted his teeth and looked away. He wanted to run. He wanted to curl into a ball and wait for this nightmare to pass. But something inside him clicked instead. He'd always thought of himself as ordinary. Average grades, average strength, average ambition. But now, floating in the void with his ship under enemy control, he realized something terrifying. No one else was coming to save them. If help existed, it was light years away. It was up to him. He retreated into the ducts, moving with purpose now. His first goal, recon. He accessed a bypass panel in the maintenance hub, one of the few systems the aliens hadn't locked down. A few seconds of rerouting, and he managed to power up a local feed from internal sensors. He saw the full scope of it. The Varnak had secured the bridge, engineering, and communication arrays. But they hadn't reached the cryo bay or the auxiliary life support system, places he knew like the back of his hand. He could move. He could hide. He could sabotage. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to signal Earth. But first, he needed information. He downloaded the schematic maps, memorized the patrol routes from the feed, and marked 3 possible locations where he might find tools, food, and maybe even allies. Then he shut the panel, crawled back into the dark, and began his journey. For the first time in his life, Jace Wren wasn't just a helper. He was the resistance. Jace Wren moved through the air ducts like a phantom, hands raw from gripping metal, and knees aching from endless crawling. The Horizon Arc was a labyrinth, but he knew its underbelly. The crawl spaces, repair corridors, and half-forgotten compartments that never made it onto public schematics. The Varnak, for all their technology and muscle, had yet to learn this ship's secrets. He stopped at a vent just above the mess hall. Below, two aliens with reptilian skin and obsidian armor stood over a shattered table. One of them was eating something that looked like it used to be part of the crew supply rations. Jace clenched his jaw. Every detail he saw was another needle of rage, another reason to keep going. But he couldn't afford a fight. Not yet. He moved on, deeper into the ducts until he reached compartment K-22, an old storage room used for spare comms gear. He pried open the grate and slipped inside, landing with a soft thump. Dust clouded the air. No patrols, no cameras, just racks of outdated tech and a flickering light overhead. He exhaled for the first time in hours. Digging through the shelves, he found a partially functional relay transmitter, a dinosaur by modern standards, but something he might be able to use. The Varnak had fried the main communication systems, but the relay worked on a low-frequency band, a loophole he hoped they'd overlooked. He powered it up, sparks hissing from the cracked console. Come on, come on. Static buzzed, then the faintest pulse of a signal. Encrypted, narrow, weak. He patched in his ID code and broadcast a simple message. Human vessel Horizon Arc compromised. Hostile force on board. Requesting aid. Coordinates locked. Please respond. He repeated it 3 times, then shut it down. Any more would risk detection. Now came the hard part. Waiting. But silence didn't last. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Jace flattened behind a crate, breath caught in his throat. The door creaked. A figure slipped in, not Varnak. A woman, limping, clutching her ribs. Wait, Jace whispered, emerging from the shadows. She flinched, raising a metal pipe like a weapon. I'm human, he said quickly, holding up his hands. Maintenance tech. Name's Jace. The woman squinted, then sagged against the wall. Lieutenant Arya Voss, she said through gritted teeth. Linguistics officer. You're hurt. Cracked rib. Maybe 2. She winced. They dragged me across the bridge deck after the first wave. I played dead when they left me alone. Jace helped her sit. She winced but nodded her thanks. Then her eyes lit up at the sight of the relay unit. You got a signal out? Maybe. I don't know if it reached Earth. Smart using the old band. Varnak tech doesn't scan below their own comm thresholds. Jace blinked. You know their systems? Bits and pieces. I've studied their language for years, part of a xenolinguistics team back on Luna. Before they scattered us. Jace leaned forward. Then we might have a shot. They sat together, huddled over the relay unit as Arya sketched out Varnak command structures from memory. She explained their behavior, their obsession with dominance, their reliance on a rigid hierarchy. Most importantly, she described their command codes. If they could intercept a command burst, maybe they could fake a signal, disrupt their control systems. They treat orders like sacred law, Arya said. If you fake a retreat signal or scramble their ranks, they'll spiral into confusion. We just need access to their link, Jace said. Ow! She pointed to the engineering deck. Their officers are coordinating from the auxiliary core. That's where they plugged their relay node into our ship. It was also the most fortified location on the vessel. But Jace nodded anyway. I can get us close, he said. I know the ducks, but we'll need more gear, power packs, insulated coils, maybe a dampener for the signal spoof. Arya coughed, but stood with effort. Then we go to supply deck C. I saw some crates down there when I was brought through. Together, they slipped back into the ducts, this time moving as a team. Jace guided them along the narrow passages while Arya whispered translated Varnak phrases she overheard, code names, positions, priorities. Every word became a weapon. Near deck C, they paused as 2 aliens passed below. Jace watched them through a grate, noting the gear slung on their backs. That's their pulse scrambler, Arya said softly. If we get it, We can fry their node with its own feedback. Jace nodded. Then let's take it. They waited for the moment to strike, not with violence, but precision. Jace dropped a broken pipe from above. It clanged across the floor, drawing the Varnak toward the sound. While they investigated, Jace and Arya slipped down behind them, snatched the device, and disappeared into the dark. Back in their hidden compartment, Jace studied the scrambler while Arya wired together a bypass. In less than an hour, they had the beginnings of a plan, a way to inject a false command into the Varnak network and cause chaos. They won't expect resistance, Jace said. They think they already won. Arya looked at him, bruised and breathing hard. Let's prove them wrong. And just like that, in the shadows of the ducts, a rebellion was born. The air was thin near the engineering subgrid, and the walls vibrated with a steady hum as power coursed through the Horizon Ark's veins. Jace Wren crouched inside a cramped service shaft, watching through a thin vent as two Varnak guards stood alert outside the auxiliary power node. Arya Voss was beside him, her breath shallow, one hand on her ribs. They had spent the last 2 hours crawling through ducts, evading detection, gathering pieces for their sabotage, and now they were one step from executing their plan. Jace pulled out the salvaged pulse scrambler, now modified with a stolen capacitor and hardwired trigger. "This'll burn out the node's primary buffer, if I can get close enough," he whispered. Arya nodded. "If you hit the buffer, their command feed will stutter. That's our window." Jace's mind raced. They weren't soldiers. They didn't have guns, armor, or backup. All they had was timing, clever wiring, and desperation. "Remember," Arya said, "Varnak trusts the chain of command completely. If we splice in a fake order right after the scramble, something loud, like a retreat directive, they'll obey before they question it." Jace grinned faintly. "Good. Let's make some noise." They waited for a shift change. Arya had overheard the phrase T. Caraval earlier, meaning rotation protocol. At precisely the right moment, the guards turned away to receive a transmission. Jace moved. He dropped through the vents silently, landing behind a storage crate. He sprinted low across the floor and reached the power console. The guard began turning back. He had seconds. He yanked off the access panel, jammed the scrambler's leads into the buffer core, and triggered the overload. A violent pop, and a burst of electrical arcs tore through the node. Lights flickered wildly. Sirens blared in Varnak frequencies. The guards turned, shrieking in confusion, and bolted toward the sparking panel. They didn't see Jace duck into the wall. Up in the duct, Arya was already tapping commands into the Varnak comm unit they had reprogrammed. She spoke clearly in their tongue, voice cold and commanding. "Krajan Talvok, Evacuation Protocol 7. All squads, return to shuttle points. Repeat, retreat to extraction zones. Command shift authorized by Prime Overseer." The message echoed through the alien network in seconds. The result was immediate. Down below, the guards froze. One of them barked a challenge into its wrist comm, but the message repeated again, louder, more authoritative. They hesitated, then obeyed. All across the ship, the Varnak reacted with confusion. Some resisted, but others, conditioned to follow the voice of command, abandoned their positions and rushed toward the cargo bay. The chain was breaking. Jace rejoined Arya in the vent. "It worked," he breathed. She smiled. First crack in the wall. With the confusion spreading, Jace and Arya pushed forward. Their next target, the brig where the remaining human officers were being held. They reached the corridor just outside it, peering down from service shaft. For guards were stationed outside. The false order wouldn't hold them. They were likely part of the inner circle. Jace examined the environment. Pipes overhead, a broken panel nearby, a spill of coolant seeping down the floor. He had an idea. He slipped back into the shaft and reemerged near the environmental controls. Using his tools, he redirected excess coolant pressure into the pipe above the guards. Arya positioned herself near a secondary panel, ready with the emergency override. "Now," Jace whispered. He vented the pressure. A violent hiss blasted through the corridor as ice-cold vapor gushed from above, freezing the air and coating the guards in frost. The Varnak howled, and slipped on the coolant slick floor. Arya hit the override. Doors slammed shut behind the guards, locking them inside the corridor. Jace sprinted down the hall, bypassed the brig's keypad, and opened the holding cells. 6 crew members stared in disbelief. "Commander Hfy," Jace said, saluting awkwardly. "Welcome back." She blinked. "You're the helper kid." "Yeah, well, not today." They quickly explained the situation. Hfy took control immediately, distributing roles and tasks. Weapons were still scarce, but the engineering team could fabricate some stun lances using repurposed tools. A medic stabilized Arya's ribs while Jace checked on the pulse of the ship. "Still no full command access," he muttered, "but I can route life support controls. If we seal the cargo bay and pump in CO2, flush out the remaining Varnak," Hfy said, finishing his sentence. Jace grinned. "Exactly." Minutes later, chaos erupted in the cargo bay as Jace activated the flush cycle. The Varnak, now aware they'd been deceived, tried to regroup, but many had already abandoned their positions. Those left behind gasped and choked as the atmosphere shifted. In the confusion, Hfy and the newly freed crew struck from behind, overwhelming the day's guards with shock tools and sheer resolve. Jace moved toward the final objective, the bridge. He knew it would be crawling with the remaining elites, but if they could reach the command terminal, they could disable the alien override and finally regain full control of the ship. As he reached the last security bulkhead, he paused. Arya limped up beside him, bruised and pale. "This is it," she said. Jace nodded. They weren't trained. They weren't ready. But they were alive, and they were done hiding. Together, with improvised weapons in hand and fire in their eyes, they pushed forward into the heart of the storm. The blast doors to the bridge loomed ahead, sealed shut with Varnak biolocks. Muscular organic tech fused into the ship's framework. Jace Wren stared at the strange, pulsing structure, his jaw tight. "This is where they took root," he murmured. "Right into the command systems." Beside him, Lieutenant Arya Voss steadied herself against the wall, her breath ragged. Behind them, Commander Hfy and a small squad of liberated crew approached, armed with makeshift stun rods, welding torches, and fragments of broken Varnak gear. "Any idea how to crack that door?" Hfy asked. Jace stepped forward, eyes locked on the alien lock. "Maybe not cleanly," he muttered, "but violently?" "Yeah." He unpacked the stolen Varnak pulse scrambler, now rewired a third time, a crude overload bomb. He knelt beside the lock, embedded the capacitor leads into the soft alien tissue, and stepped back. Everyone behind cover. The device whined, then burst in a crackle of heat and light. The biolock hissed, convulsed, and the doors cracked open. The bridge was chaos. 2 elite Varnak officers turned as Jace and the crew stormed in. These were not like the others, taller, armored, their eyes glowing with a dark intelligence. One barked in its guttural tongue, and plasma tendrils whipped into life around its gauntlets. Hfy charged forward, deflecting a bolt with a metal shield and slamming her rod into the nearest console. Sparks erupted. Arya ducked behind the central panel, scanning for the override interface. Jace ran to her side, fingers dancing across the cracked screen. "They've buried it under alien protocols. Wait, I see it." He began isolating the command subroutine. The system fought back, flashing red glyphs and alien code across every panel. "Can you disable their control?" Arya shouted, ducking as a plasma bolt tore overhead. Jace narrowed his eyes. "Not disable. Overwrite." He inserted a backup chip from the relay unit and began uploading a hard-coded Earth security protocol, one that would force a system reboot and sever all foreign command threads. "The bridge will shut down for 30 seconds. No one moves, no one breathes. Then control is ours." "Do it," Arya said. Jace hit the command key. Instantly, the lights dimmed. Power cut. Consoles died. The entire bridge shuddered. The Varnak screamed in confusion, groping at their helmets. Without their neural link, their coordination faltered. Commander Hfy lunged, slamming one with a shock baton. Another crew member tackled the second. In the dark, humanity fought with raw instinct. At second 25, The bridge rebooted. Panels lit up, blue and human again. Earth standard code returned to every screen. Jace duffed the helm, fingers flying over the controls. How about manual override? Nav is back. Hfy barked into the intercom. This is Commander Hfy. Horizon Arc is under human control. All personnel hold positions. Final sweep in progress. Cheers erupted over the comms. But it wasn't over yet. Jace looked up at the long-range scanner. Arya, he said slowly, we've got a problem. She hobbled over and froze. 3 Varnak gunships were inbound. Fast, deadly, responding to the disruption. ETA? Hfy asked. 3 minutes. No weapons, no defense grid. Horizon Arc was still reeling. We need a miracle, Arya whispered. Jace's eyes flicked to the transmitter array. Maybe we don't need guns, he said. Just a bluff. He rigged the remaining scrambler components into the comm system, boosted it with engineering coils, and directed a signal burst at the Varnak ships. What are you doing? Arya asked. Faking an Earth fleet presence, he replied. Channeling a war fleet profile. Squadrons, trajectories, power readings. You think they'll buy it? They already fell for a fake retreat order. Let's go 2 for 2. He hit transmit. For a moment, silence. Then the scanner pulsed. The Varnak ships changed course. Arya let out a strangled laugh. They're running. Hfy grinned. Smart bastards. They didn't want to face a human war fleet. Jace leaned back, adrenaline finally crashing. And we don't even have a laser pointer left. Hours later, the ship floated in relative peace. The crew had resecured major systems, treated the wounded, and swept the last Varnak stragglers into containment. Jace stood on the bridge beside Arya as Earth Command finally responded to their early distress call. Horizon Arc, this is Fleet Relay 9. We received your transmission. You are clear to return to Earth orbit. We'll have intercept vessels on standby. Status update requested. Arya stepped forward to respond, but paused. Instead, she looked at Jace. He blinked. Me? You got us this far. You finish it. Jace swallowed, then nodded. This is part-time maintenance technician Jace Wren of the Horizon Arc. He said into the mic, we were boarded by Varnak raiders. Ship was overtaken. Crew was scattered. But we took her back. He looked around at the survivors. Faces bruised, bloodied, but alive. Together. We're coming home. Epilogue. They landed to a hero's welcome, though Jace tried to stay at the back of the crowd. It didn't work. Commander Hfy mentioned his name in every debrief. Arya spoke his praise before the Science Council. He was offered full-time engineering positions on 3 different fleets. But what stuck most was the inscription on the repaired bridge plaque aboard Horizon Arc. In darkest hours, courage flickers to life in the most unexpected places. Dedicated to the resilience of the human spirit and one unlikely hero. Jace stared at it for a long time before smiling. He didn't start this journey a soldier, but he'd ended it as something more.